It's part 3 of the year that I got skinny. In this episode, we are about to see my big goal, my dream of losing weight and getting out and hiking with my sons. My big goal, crushed on the floor of a cheap Chinese food restaurant. Okay, that is what episode 3 is about, because where we left off in episode 2 was the beginnings of my big goal of hiking. And so I had never been a hiker, ever. And it was kind of crazy, like, how is it that I ended up being a hiker? I mean, where did that even come from? And from episode 2 that I attribute it to sort of supernatural sources. You must listen to that if you haven't. But what I did, so I was very open to what my weight maintenance would be. What would my solution be? At this point, I thought it would be hiking. And I made that decision the week of September 16th of 2016. And so through the fall of that year, I was out hiking with my sons. We went on a number of family vacations. We spent the actual election in Sedona. I remember watching election returns there, but we were out hiking, and that was wonderful. And then it was mid-December when we would be in Palm Springs, and we went to this cheap Chinese buffet. I just wish this story had a better restaurant. I do. I wish that. It was a cheap Chinese buffet. Okay. And in it had the restaurant had like a little area where like the flooring, the carpeting covered an uneven part. There was like concrete flooring, little uneven part. So there was a little tiny step, or like tripping step in the floor in the middle of the restaurant. I was sitting at the table. And at this point, I weighed probably 260 pounds. And I noticed that my boys are getting ice cream. So, at those places where you can get the soft serve. And so if in 2016, my boys would have been 14 and 8, okay? And they were over getting the soft serve. And one of their big recreational points with a soft serve at that time was to get it as tall as you could. And so the older one at 14, he was a master. I'm telling you guys, the ice creams were like this. They were like this, okay? And so I hear this cheering in the restaurant, and there's my boy walking with his ice cream, and people are cheering. And I was like, oh, dear God, what if it drops or whatever? But then it occurs to me, wait a minute, what about my 8-year-old? I don't see him, and he's coming with this, and oh my gosh. So I jump up, and I'm just so focused on, wait a minute, where is he? What am I doing? And I'm not thinking about where I'm walking, and I trip on this thing. Okay, so I trip on it. My mind is completely on the ice cream. Okay, not on eating it. Maybe I was, but on the point that my kids were about to drop it on the floor of the restaurant. And so I trip. Okay. And I remember it so vividly because it was one of those slow motion trips where I'm kind of flying through the air, and I catch myself on some chairs. Like, oh, I caught myself. And then, you catch yourself, but then you keep falling. Or, so I was excited that I had caught myself, but then I didn't catch myself. It maybe broke my fall just a little bit, but then, whoa. And I'll tell you what, 260 pounds, right on your knee. Ooh, I could see the stars, oh my gosh, I was just laying there, and a man in a booth right there, he trying to help me up. Very, very nice of him to do that, but I was just laying there like this, My husband came over, he helped get me up. We were pretty much done anyway, and so we just left. And oh my gosh, the pain. And I, really, by the time, when we then finished our vacation there, I just was laid up in the room. And I remember coming home, and he drove all the way home. I couldn't bend my knee enough to drive. I went to the hospital, and they determined there were no breaks or rips, and nothing that would require surgery, just healing of the meniscus. But I couldn't drive in the beginning. It would be 3 weeks. So the injury was on December 16th, and it would be January 6th when I would drive the first time. I was so heartbroken because I saw the hiking as my key. I was all lathered up. We were doing it. We were out there doing it. And then, whoo, that knee. What am I going to do? That was my key. I was so invested. That was my key to my weight loss. And now I can't even walk, can't even bend my knee enough to drive. And so on January 6th, I had, recovered enough, I guess, that I could bend my knee enough to drive. But I was still really hobbling around. And in these weeks, that's when I got to my high weight of 280. So, I was eating more and all that, drinking more, all that. Of course, I was devastated. And I didn't have a plan. Like, what would I do now? So January 6th, we get in the car, my son and I, my older son, and we're driving around. The rains had come. The drought in California was breaking that very day. It was like all these rains, all these storms, and all these little seasonal creeks forming near our home in the giant Sequoia National Monument. It was wonderful. It was just such a wonderful break from the drought. And I was able to get in the car and drive around, and we looked at all those little seasonal waterways. And I just remember I had a moment out there as I drove past a certain area, a certain waterway, and saw the puddles. And I thought, like, I would love to get out and dance in those puddles. I wanted nothing more than that, but I couldn't. I mean, I could only just drive. And I'm not about to dance in a puddle with the knee injury that I had. And I just had one of those deep moments of will I ever be able to dance in a puddle again? Will I? And I thought about my dad, who's had mobility issues, and I wondered, and he was in his 70s then, and what would life be like for me in my 70s? Because I was only 47 at this time. How would things be for me at 70? And I wondered, would I even be alive at 70? Would I even be alive? And it really was my darkest moment. Right there by those puddles in the car. I drove to my dad's. So we looked at all the water that day, and it was the next day, early. I drove up to my dad's, who also lifelong struggle with obesity, and went to him. And I said to him, Dad, I'm considering having bariatric surgery, and I just need your advice. And so we talked through it. And he said, I've had the opportunity a couple times in my life to have bariatric surgery. And I look back on that and think, maybe I should have. I'm not going to have it now at this age, but maybe I should have had it then. And yes, maybe you should have it. And so it was that conversation with my dad that led me to schedule an appointment with a surgeon. And I began the process of being approved for bariatric surgery. But before we get too far ahead, and because I get this question all the time, you guys do know the spoiler that I never did not have bariatric surgery or any weight loss surgery. I've had some other surgeries. I had C-sections or whatever. Nothing that is about weight loss. But I was approved for it. And I was approved for it because of those days with the puddles. I saw it as my only hope. So I wasn't able to hike. I'd seen that as my thing, maybe that was going to be my solution. And then with that injured knee, I just couldn't imagine what else I would do. I just couldn't imagine it. And so I went in to consult with a surgeon, and that is when I discovered that I weighed 280 pounds. And I was so shocked. I was so shocked by that. And that maybe requires its own video, its own episode. Stay tuned for the next episode. And we began that process of getting approved. And it came from that darkest hour out with those puddles. And I'll tell you, I get very emotional now out in the rain. I do. I didn't imagine I would ever be able to get out again. Okay, next. It's worth it, you guys. It's worth it. Stay tuned for the next episode, okay, of the year that I got skinny. Okay, that was episode, 2 or 3 or something? I don't know. Next up.